In a few moments, I'll sign a historic executive order to ban men from competing in women's sports. It's about time.
That's the voice of our president just moments before he signed an order banning males from female sports in publicly funded schools. But here in Virginia, our high school sports league is taking a different direction. Plus, why is a Virginia senator using an abortion coercion case involving a teen to justify less regulations for abortionists? We'll tell you all about it. From the Family Foundation, I'm your host, Candi Cushman, with our president, Victoria Cobb.
Well, hello, everyone. If you are laughing because we suddenly appeared on your screen in this ridiculous hologram format, that's okay because we're laughing at ourselves too. And I'll explain in a minute how we got to this point. But first, I just want to say we're interrupting your regular programming with this little drop-in because we have some really big late-breaking news that we wanted to get into this show. And we have a great show planned for you in our regular studio where we do not look like this for the rest of the time, where I think you're going to find it really enjoyable and very informative. But in the show that we had previously recorded, we had talked about the VHSL, the governing body that handles high school sports in Virginia, that they had been dragging their feet. It seemed like they were looking for a way to get out of it or a loophole or something. When the Trump executive order came down saying that that men have to get out of women's sports, that they can no longer invade women's sports. And in light of that, we got news right after we recorded that I think you're going to be really encouraged by. But first, I'll just tell you, the reason we're in this crazy thing that looks like we're in a coffee bar or something and like weird mini-me heads or something is because first, there was a snow day and we couldn't get everyone into the office. And then we tried to do it virtually and we had trouble with that. And this is where we landed. So this may go down in the Hall of Fame of one of our craziest recordings. But with that said, Victoria, bring us up to speed on this huge news that I think people will be glad to hear.
Yeah, we are thrilled that VHSL has finally agreed to come into compliance. So they certainly spent several days acting like we don't want to, we're not going to, if we possibly can't, we won't. And that's what we talk about on the podcast. But we're glad that they have issued a statement, and in fact, they will create guidelines. They will comply with. Now, of course, I will mention they're still using language like, we'll agree that only those assigned at birth by a certain sex. I hate that language. We talk about that later in the podcast, but at least they're doing the right thing now.
Yeah. And it's interesting what led up to this. Tell us a little bit about that, what you think might have influenced this sudden turnaround.
Well, I think there's two things. One, we were talking with school boards, and school boards were saying we will comply, basically, so the league better get on board because they are the ones that stand to risk. They're the ones that could risk their federal funding. It isn't the high school association of sports. It is actually the schools. So my guess is there were conversations between school boards and VHSL about that, and they felt the pressure. And then I think the most exciting thing is the governor really came out strong.
Yeah, I'm going to flash up on the screen here his post on Facebook, or maybe it was X on this. It was, like you said, very strong. And I think it did play a large role in this turnaround. And you can see on there, he's talking about it's common sense that we don't have biological men jeopardizing women's sports. But he also said that they are risking millions of dollars when they are out of compliance. Very strong statement for our governor. And it seemed like it was just a few days or hours later when the forthcoming announcement from VHSL came out. So we just want to thank everyone who played a role in this. And also, I want to give a shout out to our Speak Up teams who have been very persistent going to school boards about this issue. And even in Speak Up Charlottesville had gone to the actual VHSL headquarters.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic that we've been so engaged from day one on every level with the school boards, with the actual league itself. And so it's nice to finally see this come into play. We still want a law. So we're still disappointed the House didn't, hear the bill on the law. And we'll talk about that in the podcast. But this,
you mean Virginia, now, here in Virginia didn't.
Yeah, we need a state law. And so that's just because a presidential executive order lasts as long as the president lasts. And so we really need something much more permanent to save girls' sports. But we are where we are. This is a big, big move. And I have to mention, we're still seeing that there are people who are still in opposition despite all the pressure. If you look at the articles around this, around these issues, you'll see Senator Rome is still, now, for context, remind people, this individual ran as the first transgender elected official. And so this has been a big part of the platform. And so, of course, the news goes to the senator to get the reaction. And it's basically VHSL should have waited because all these other executive orders have litigation against them. So, really, this league should have held out until the court forced them to do the right thing, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And I just think the reason this is significant is because so many of you that have been going to your school boards have been hearing over and over these reasons. Well, we can't do anything because of Biden's interpretation of Title IX. We can't do anything because this is VHSL policy. So I'm hoping this is really going to open up doors for parents to be able to better protect their girls. So with that said, I think we can head into our regular programming. Victoria, I do want to give you one chance to just give your disclaimer on how much you hate holograms and hope to never do this again.
I hate when people look like cutouts, and if I move, you're going to see me fall off the screen, or if somebody walks behind me, I think they're totally lame. But I appreciate technology trying to compensate for backgrounds, because sometimes what you would get in the background of my house if I have to be from home, it could be interesting in my house with 4 kids and a dog. You never know.
Yeah. All right. We'll see you next time. Enjoy the rest of the program.
Welcome to Speak Up Virginia. Glad to have you back with us. Well, Trump is still at it, going at a breakneck speed, making waves not only nationally, but across the world.
Yeah, we got executive order after executive order. And I think even if there had just been the one, hey, by the way, we're going to offer this retirement package and the whole government, that would be enough to disrupt everything. If you're in Northern Virginia right now, that is all they're talking about because, everybody's job is tied to the federal government. So anyway, we're in wild times. But I think a lot of the executive orders, we're pretty excited about. But it is funny because it's creating all these, I don't know if you follow on the internet, but there's just all these memes about kind of this ridiculous pace that he's at. And honestly, I was thinking he's done more in a few, I shouldn't say this, but he's done more than I feel like Biden did in 4 years in 4 days. It's like he's constantly doing stuff.
Oh, he's definitely set a new pace.
The next president, whatever age they are, is going to have a hard time keeping up.
Because before it used to be watch the first 100 days, and now it's the first week. The first few seconds.
You're right. I don't even know what all he had in his 100 days, but I think he accomplished it in his first week.
Way past that moment. We're going to show some of these memes here on the screen. They've just been
pretty comical.
You've got the leftist complete freak out, so it's sort of interesting. Wherever you are, kind of the meme reflects the mindset. But we did have some, too, from conservatives, kind of, okay, all my leftist friends are freaking out, but I'm kind of here in the background grinning.
Well, it's like you're watching somebody throwing plates everywhere, and we all knew that something had to be broken to be fixed, right? So I think there's a lot of people kind of going, okay, we're pretty excited about this, but it's just so wild and chaotic until it all settles down. It's sort of hard to know.
That's a great way to put that. Well, one of the executive orders that's making the most waves right now is this order that has the actual title, Keeping Men Out of Women's Sports.
I love that. He's right on. That's what's been going on. Let's not call it anything else. Let's not pretend
just right out there. Yeah. So we're going to play a clip of him speaking right before he signed that.
Nice crowd, isn't it, huh? You've been waiting a long time for this. Yeah. So have I. Actually, it was so ridiculous. But here we are. And this doesn't have to be long. It's just all about common sense. Doesn't have to be long. In a few moments, I'll sign a historic executive order to ban men from competing in women's sports. It's about time. Under the Trump administration, we will defend the proud tradition of female athletes, and we will not allow men to beat up, injure, and cheat our women and our girls. From now on, women's sports will be only for women.
It is was just so encouraging to hear those words, that this is ending now. We're going to stop endangering women, stop the cheating, as he puts it, so they can have it, get their scholarships that they deserve.
Yeah.
So, Victoria, help us understand what this executive order really does.
Yeah, I mean, mostly it's putting all K-12 schools in particular and college on sort of notice, and even sports associations as they connect to all these schools, that basically if you receive any kind of federal money for your operations, then you are going to stop letting men invade women's sports. And so they're at risk of losing the federal funding if they don't go along with this executive order. So, and I think it sounds like they're also open to federal investigation if they don't, if they kind of don't stop these kind of offensive actions to women. And so it kind of truly restores the purpose of what Title IX was all along. It's just we've lost sight of that. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, when you think about it, it really is just completely reversing, turning the tables on everything Biden was doing, because before, the Biden administration was actually the one threatening schools that they were going to lose their federal funding if they didn't let males invade these female spaces.
If they didn't wrongly interpret Title IX. Yeah, it is a direct reversal.
They were launching investigations into these schools. And I even remember, it's a little bit on a different note, but just tells you the way things are going. Remember, we talked about on the podcast this school in Georgia that tried to listen to parents about taking explicit content. Probably a lot of it was LGBTQ, not age appropriate. And the Biden administration sent like their civil rights to investigate them. Yeah. So it's like the exact opposite, exact reverse now happening under Trump.
Yeah, I have to admit, schools probably have whiplash, but that's because they were going down this terrible road, and there has to be a very, very strong opposite reaction from where it's been headed. So, it's pretty wild.
He has the courage to do that. And so now we've got the immediate ripple effects out of that. Tell us what's going on here in Virginia. Or just, statewide and Virginia.
Let me start with the NCAA, because I think that's, all of college sports, we're sort of watching on that front. And, it looks like they're going to bar men from competing in women's sports. So that's a big move. We've talked about the volleyball teams on this, that had the male that was actually literally spiking so hard it's almost like scary to beat. You remember that whole thing?
Roanoke swim team.
Yes, Roanoke swim team. So we've hit this issue a number of times. So it feels like this wonderful moment for these, especially for these girls who have been brave enough to speak out. You see Riley Gaines in the background of the presidential signing. Yeah. And also just for these young children. What a beautiful little scene of these young kids coming around the president when he signs it. Just all of that. So it's exciting to see how it's playing out on the college level now.
I got to make a note about the NCAA's statement, because it's good what they did, but I noticed they're still saying in the women's sports that you can compete. You're only people assigned female at birth. I'm like, we didn't make a choice when we were born as females.
So ridiculous. Well, that's why I liked President Trump when he said there's only going to be two genders, and it's the ones at conception. That's why I liked his statement so much, because it was like, we're getting rid of this dumb assigned at birth thing that the left has tried to do.
Well, and I think language like that does undermine our civil rights protections, because it's implying that we just decided to be female.
Yeah, it'd be fine if they said the gender that God assigns that you see at your birth. That would be my preferred way of saying it, but that's probably not going to roll with secularists. So anyway.
Of course, things are playing out a little differently in Virginia. Seems to be a pattern. What's going on?
I mean, there has been a long battle with Virginia. So I have to explain how Virginia sports go in our K-12. It's really high school, in our high school leagues. A lot of states don't do this, but the way we do our sports is that all public school sports in Virginia, the teams are in the Virginia High School League. And that entity is actually a private entity, but yet it's sort of all the authority over public high school sports kind of rests with them. And so there's been a battle for a while, because they changed their policies to allow boys into girls' sports. And of course, a reporter made sure to tell me, but they've rejected some. I mean, I had some battle with the reporter, and he's like, this is not a big deal, and some people don't get their desire to play. And I was like, that's not the point. Many do, and their qualifications are really poor. They basically say, well, if you've had if you've made the change prior to puberty, or you're on hormones, or you have a consistent identity. I mean, it's not a very strict standard, despite what they try to make it sound. So all that to say, that's kind of been the policy of our public high schools now in Virginia when they play sports. And what they've so this executive order comes out, and really, my expectation is they have to get in line, because all of these public schools do get federal funding. Every single county gets money from the feds, and yet they seem to be hemming and hawing. They seem to be saying, well, we haven't really seen it yet. We don't, it's like not an immediate. Of course, we're going to get in line, and it rolls out this whole question of what if they didn't get in line. So it's just an interesting if they don't come around. We sort of looked at it, and technically in their manual, they describe a school board basically has to authorize kids to play in their league, although they all do. So I was trying to ponder, could you as a public school say, we want our federal funds, this league is non-compliant, we're going to have to step out of the league.
Interesting.
What kind of pressure could be put on this league? So it's going to be interesting to see how it rolls out, because it's a complicated way that we do public sports. And honestly, I've never liked the system, because when you talk to legislators and you say, we want to govern, get boys out of girls, they kind of go, well, the Virginia High School League is handling that. They shove off authority onto this private organization. And then the school boards kind of do the same thing. And so you kind of have this group out here, and they take the fall for everybody else having a bad policy. And so they need to get in line. They need to get in line quickly. And if they don't, school boards need to force them to get in line by saying, well, then we're going to have to back out. I mean, my kids in a non-public school play some public school. So you can play some sports outside of, but they worry about things like state titles. Like, how am I going to be the best football team in the state at a public school if I'm not in the Virginia High School League?
Yeah, and these kind of qualifications people are trying to put up, that doesn't address the problem of having to be in the locker room and changing with a boy or in the shower area, and the endangerment that you as a female competing as a young high
qualification that makes this any better. There's no sort of, if we only do it this way, it'll be okay. That's not the case. But I was really intrigued, and this is a little one-off, but where you see this group show up in the Code of Virginia, there was a thing where they basically directed a whole group of folks to look at guidelines around heart issues, because if you remember, athletes in heat were having heart issues. And what's interesting is who was sort of all in this group that was supposed to create these guidelines. And I looked and I saw, for example, Children's Hospital of the King's Daughter. Well, where did we just see them in the headlines? Well, they just now had to stop their surgeries for kids doing gender change. And I think if these are the people creating guidelines and in and around our high school sports league, we're not going to get to good conclusions. So
this is where people lose their trust in kind of the professional communities that hopefully some of these reversals are going to restore. But it does appear to me, when I'm just looking at the news headlines on VHSL, that they do, I hope they come into compliance, but right now they look like they're digging their heels.
They're definitely trying to stall,
They look like they're looking for
else.
a loophole, is kind of what it appears.
I think that's right. I think that's exactly right. I think you nailed it. I think they want to see the dotted I's and the crossed T's, and is there any way to duck? And actually, I've heard that in many of these executive orders, that is what's going on. Folks are kind of going, well, in particular, some of the efficiency ones, like the DEI ones, how well was it written? Because, these entities actually tried to play shell games where they sort of retitled things and moved people around. This is the same. I think VHSL is doing the same thing.
Well, the polls are showing
this is the thing.
Yeah. Tell us about the polls.
Yeah, there is no question, and it depends which poll you look at, but we're talking about like 80% of the populace is on board with separating sports and making sure that girls don't have to compete against boys. This is not a party line issue. It is a bipartisan issue, and it is honestly, I've heard some say these are the kind of things where when you look at party politics also, you see in the polls that the Republicans have more favorability, that like the tagline of being a Republican just generically has more favorability than it used to. And Democrats, it is more unfavorable. And some people think it's these issues that are literally starting to take people from going like, I'm not that excited to identify as a Democrat because this seems absurd.
Yeah.
And I mean, so I think we're actually seeing shifting of people around things that seem so logical that people have gone to such extremes within certain political parties.
Yeah, and we see that at the ground level.
Oh, definitely.
With our speak up teams.
Well, we had a bill. What did they do in the House? They shelved the bill. So, I mean, they didn't want to have to vote on it.
Because we had 100 parents and their kids showing up at the Capitol for Mama Bear Day. And this was one of the big issues on their radar that they spoke about. And, we had this press conference rally featuring all these moms and dads, and they visited over 20 legislative offices. And that was one of their big points, was stop ignoring what we're saying on protecting our girls. And, this is also just translating into them dealing with this transgender ideology still being pushed into the schools, especially in the Nova area. So I just want to let us listen to this one clip of Kaylee. I mean, this mom, she was so beautiful, the way she was able to articulate her concerns in just a very loving way. So we're just going to listen to her real quick.
My husband and I have a difficult decision to make this fall, as he is approaching preschool age, and we are faced with the decision of whether or not we are going to put our child in public school system where Fairfax County has decided to move forward with instituting gender studies in elementary school. Despite having done a study group, a focus group in the community to see if parents even wanted this. And when parents said no, the board voted 16-0 and said we're moving forward anyways. This shows clearly that they see parents not as partners, but as an obstacle for their agenda. And I have a really hard time looking at him and going, here, I'm just going to give you over to people who do not want to partner with me in how you're going to be raised. School and education is a huge part of a child's life. And early childhood is supposed to be filled with exploration and creativity and fun, not debating issues that are for adults to handle. These kinds of topics should be introduced sensitively and by parents who are raising their children with their values, not with an ideology passed down from the top. And so this isn't about discrimination. This is about age appropriateness. This is about parents being parents and the school being the support system to parents that it was created to be.
Yeah, I think this was so powerful. And of course, I'm having flashbacks of holding my kid at a mic, in the earlier years. And just that she's sitting here thinking, I've got to make decisions about where my kids go to school. And you guys keep doing absurd things in the K-12 arena where it's like, even if I wanted to put my kids in public school, you're forcing me out, which is what she really said.
Right. And a lot of these parents were saying, we actually want to trust our local public schools, but you are putting us in a position with the sports and the pushing this ideology on elementary kids. You're putting us in the position of having to make this decision. And you spoke to Victoria at this Mama Bear Day event and Papa Bears. We had some Papa Bears there too speaking, but you kind of wound things up for them or closed it out at the press conference. What were the most important points in your mind that you were trying to get across there that you wanted people to hear?
Well, I mean, first it was a call to these legislators to get the job done, to actually, we were right at crossover, but there was still bills on the table that dealt with parental rights that they needed to come on board with. And so, it was kind of a push for that. But it was also trying to really be very direct and let them know that, the idea that several of these bills, so Save Girls Sports, SAGE's law, which is another parental rights issue, our school's going to tell parents, some of these bills, instead of voting for them in the House, even if you voted against them in committee, they didn't give them a hearing. They didn't let them even come forward to have the debate. And so some of this was about calling them out for not even giving it the democratic process. I mean, yes, we know this legislature is hostile to some of these ideas, but we couldn't even put these parents couldn't even show up in front of their legislators to testify about them. And I was really trying to kind of make the point. I mean, the Senate allowed testimony. They did kill some of these bills, but they allowed testimony. The House didn't even. And I was sort of trying to make the point, like, it's very interesting that that's the case because the Senate is not up for election this year. The House is, and it really, truly looks, if you line up the bills with polling, it literally looks like every bill where they know they are not on the side of the popular vote, they didn't want to take a vote to show that they're out of sync. So they kind of shelved all of those bills to not have to take a position.
So we heard the Senate, even though they killed all of these bills dealing with protect our girls and protect kids.
Or at least they gave it a nominal
Yeah.
something.
And Sage's Law you mentioned, I just want to mention that's the one where they need to stop inserting a barrier between parents and their kids when kids are
Going for
experimenting
counseling or-
with their gender, taking a different name, going into a different bathroom. Stop cutting the parents out, hiding it from them. That one didn't get a hearing.
Didn't get a hearing in the House.
In the House. So the House didn't hear anything. And I thought your point about, why is that? They're up for election.
I mean, I'm just trying to tie the dots that
Yeah.
are right there. I mean, it's...
But here's the thing, Victoria. How's that square with the polls? I mean, we just said these polls 80% want protecting girls. So is this about their base? I mean, because
Yeah.
the majority of Americans are with us on these issues.
I mean, we have to be aware that these elected officials, and some of this is the process of getting to be elected, they go through a primary process. And in that, you have to appease your base. And that base is made up of groups like Equality Virginia, who put all the LGBT stuff forward,
Yeah.
Planned Parenthood. They have to be as extreme to appease the extreme groups. And so you end up with legislators that aren't really, they're probably not even typical of all Democrats. That there are lots of Democrats that are on board on these sports issues, on the transgender issues, but the ones that get into office have really aggressive anti-parent views. And so they know that their views are out of the mainstream, but they certainly don't want these bills to pass. So they can't just start voting with the public. They have to dodge it. It's an incongruence.
They don't want sunlight on that their views are out of step with the mainstream, but they also don't want to make their base angry.
Exactly.
I get the picture.
It's a game.
Okay,
I'm sorry to say. I feel
yeah.
a little like I'm sort of...
This is helpful to know, I
don't
think,
want to be
for people.
cynical, but this is just really how it plays out
I think it's
down here.
helpful to hear what's going on. All right. Well, speaking of bizarre behavior in the General Assembly, we have not done an Inconceivable segment in a while.
Which is amazing, given that the General Assembly's been in for like 30 days and we haven't done an Inconceivable, because every
It's
day
not
it
because
feels
there
like...
weren't
No, there's
moments.
been moments.
Yeah.
There's been plenty.
All right. Well, I think we have an excellent one with Virginia Senator Hashmi.
She's made a few of ours in the past. And again, she has an outstanding nomination for this
Yes.
award. Is that the right way to say
Yeah.
it?
So let's get started with that. Well, it's that time again. Time for our Inconceivable Moments Award. This is where we're featuring examples of the absolute lunacy and craziness that happens when cultural leaders try to give guidance completely apart from biblical principles. And we're calling this the Liberals' Most Inconceivable Moments Award.
Inconceivable!
Well, today's Inconceivable, as we mentioned, involves a Virginia Senator, Ghazala Hashmi, who shared a story on the floor of the Senate in an effort to justify this measure she's pushing it forward that would essentially give special protections to abortionists, kind of shielding them from any accountability, most accountability legally, like if they messed up or anyway, I'll let you explain all that. I won't try to do that. But here's the really crazy, bizarre part of it, is that to justify this bill giving abortionists special protections, she cited this case involving a teen that was allegedly coerced into having an abortion, being forced to take the abortion pill. And I just want, first of all, to start with listening to a clip of Senator Hashmi using this story to justify her bill, which I feel like she used it in a way that wasn't totally upfront with what's really going on. So let's listen to that clip.
We are increasingly seeing all across the country efforts to criminalize the work of our medical community. Just last week, we found out that a physician in New York was charged by Louisiana for having prescribed medical care to a resident of Louisiana. We are seeing incidences like this all across the country post the Dobbs decision, and we are in a position here in Virginia where our medical community is feeling the chilling effects.
Okay, well, first of all, I think people need to know what the actual story here is, because you sure didn't get the story when she brought it forward. And in fact, when I saw this article in the newspaper, I thought this story illustrates why we're against this bill. So the idea that she brought it forward is unbelievable. So the real story is it's a New York case that she was sort of describing, and it refers to a Louisiana resident who, and that's how she describes it, was being prescribed abortion pills by a New York doctor. And this is all about the idea of she wants in Virginia, these doctors who are allowed to, unfortunately, do chemical abortion here, she wants to allow them to go into states that are pro-life, that have protected human life, and let them basically mess in the abortion affairs of that state and not have any ability to be held responsible. Governor from, Texas or one of these states can't actually go after this. That's what she's aiming for in her bill. And so this is the exact thing. This New York doctor is prescribing a chemical abortion to someone in Louisiana. Well, here's the thing. According to the Louisiana attorneys, this was a child, not a resident, an underage child. And
under 18.
Right. I mean, a teenager. And the child was allegedly, according to these attorneys, she was coerced by parents into taking the pills. And it's basically being reported that the teen herself had to call 911 for an ambulance after having complications. So, I mean, a horrible situation. Thankfully, they were able to save her life. But it appears this New York doctor prescribed the pills to this child without even actually meeting with the child. It was actually like a telehealth meeting with the parents that the child wasn't even part of.
Even just a questionnaire.
I'm unclear, but literally it doesn't look like the child wanted the abortion or the child was involved in deciding about the chemical abortions. But child gets coerced into taking them, and then the ramifications set in. And she's using this as this is the model example she gives of why we should protect.
This is her model of people to be protected is, abortionists like this or doctors pushing pills
It's great
on children.
when you only describe it as one sentence. She never mentions complications, never mentions teenager, never mentions coercion. And the New York doctor was recently criminally indicted by a grand jury in Louisiana for breaking their state law. I mean, you can't just go into another state from, by way of telehealth and violate
some people think you should be able to.
rules.
This doctor. The doctor's interesting.
So the doctor's name is Margaret Carpenter, and she co-founded the Abortion Coalition for Telemedicine. So this doctor is actually the one pushing this whole concept around the country.
There's another case involving her out of Texas. Same. Yeah.
It's unfortunate, and it's almost hard for those of us that desperately want to protect the unborn. It is actually so hard to imagine that there are abortionists who aren't just, we think a woman has a problem she needs to solve by taking a human life. They're literally thinking of themselves as like, we think of it as it's like the reverse of do-gooders. I've got to go and, save these people in these other states with my abortion. I mean, it's horrible.
Yeah, and it really is just such a tragic story because what I'm seeing coming out from in the news and from the prosecuting attorney is that this teen had planned to have her baby and even had a gender reveal party planned. So it really is just tragic. And then to end up calling 911 for yourself, I think is just really makes your heart go out to her in this situation. But why on earth Senator Hashmi would choose this example to justify a law granting special protections for abortionists, I'm having trouble understanding because to me, obviously, it justifies why we need to protect women, not the abortion industry.
I mean, this is the thing. We know, and this case, unfortunately, is not a one-off in the sense that we know a lot of abortion is the result of coercion. Now, usually we hear that in the context of a boyfriend or a pimp or someone. It's not usually the parents. That's almost the worst part of this story is that parents can go awry, and that's just devastating. But in this case, we have this coercion, and I just love how the Louisiana Attorney General, Liz Murrell, responded to all of this on X the other day. So we'll put it up on the screen, but she says, it's illegal to send abortion pills into the state, and it's illegal to coerce another into having an abortion. So she's totally unapologetic about holding people, accountable for breaking the abortion law. Like, you can't do abortion here. I love it. It's great.
Well, obviously, we're going to give today's Inconceivable Award to Senator Hashmi for picking a story that actually illustrates why you should vote against her bill, not for it. So that's interesting. But speaking of that, help us understand what people can do about this bill. Now, it's SB 1098, and it might have some companion bills floating around out there. But what can people do to speak up against this, and what are some reasons why they should vote against it, besides what you've already explained?
Yeah, I mean, this bill has moved over to the House because we're in crossover, so the bill has already kind of come out, and so now it's time to contact delegates in particular about this bill. And I think giving them this example, some of them won't have heard this. This was a discussion on the Senate side. So sharing this story is a great way to have a conversation with your legislator about it. Because again, we don't want to shield abortionists from the consequences of their actions in other states. They should not be trying to practice medicine outside of where their scope is in a place that's not acceptable. We don't consider it medicine, but that's not an acceptable thing. And and it violates the full faith and credit clause. This idea that there's states' rights, and we're going to have our own laws, but we're going to honor each other in the way we do business.
Yeah.
So this is a concern. And the other thing that I would just mention is there are a couple of cases that are actually pending. We hope the Supreme Court is going to take them up that kind of deal with many of these type of issues. So we just had people pardoned, on other pro-life laws. I just think we're in a new day around abortion law, and it has been clear after Dobbs came out that things go to the state level, that states can have their, and so I think the honoring between states is even more important now than it's ever been. And I think hopefully the court will kind of clarify this.
I just don't get how we can have a functioning nation if states don't have to honor each other's criminal laws.
Well, imagine we say we're not going to let you come get your, you're not going to be able to come get our abortionists, and they go, well, we're not going to let you come get your murderers that come
that really falls apart if you start going down that road.
It is a philosophy that it needs to stay intact in all ways, so that we can continue to be places that have different laws.
It seems like it's been a basic thing that we understood under the Constitution until we started getting all this woke stuff where they want to have exceptions. And also this idea of protecting abortionists at the expense of young women like this child. So I don't, it's one of those common sense things, but what do they do if they want to tell their representative to oppose it?
So, you need to be on our email alerts because that's the easiest way, because we send it out, right? We tell you it's in this committee, your legislator needs to hear from you now, that kind of thing. So, go to our website and get on the email alerts. Our website also kind of logs these things. So, ideally you can kind of, if you're not on the email, you can find it on our website. But it is really important just that you just make sure your legislator knows. And sometimes you don't get to speak to your actual legislator. Sometimes you're calling in, because honestly, calls are really effective. I'm not saying emails are, but also calling the office. So if you know who your legislator is, Google their phone number. It's not super hard. And just even if you can just register that with the secretary or legislative assistant, they actually do keep sort of a tally, if that's the right way. Even if you don't talk to them, the aide kind of transfers the information, and they then learn that this is an important bill to people, and they better pay attention and they better do the right thing.
And to that point, when we were going around during Mama Bear Day doing legislative visits, we were asking them how many emails they got and how many calls on the homeschooling issue. And every single one that we visited said, oh, we got like 300.
I'm hearing it was the top issue of the session in terms of volume of calls so far.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's true for everybody.
They were counting them. Yeah. So to your point, they do count them. So good to call in, email. And I'll just mention one other plug as we wrap up here. We talked about our action days, Mama Bear Day. Well, we have one more coming up that's a really big deal, especially on all of these life issues, and that is the Virginia March for Life. Mark your calendar, April 2nd. I think with all of these just culture of death being promoted, it is very important that we come out and celebrate. We want to celebrate a culture of life. So come out and join us April 2nd. Get registered today, and that's on the website. You'll see that banner. And so with that said, thanks for joining us once again. Remember, we are stronger when we speak together. That's been kind of the theme for today. Remember to share our playlist, the Speak Up Virginia playlist on YouTube. And if you're listening on Spotify or Apple, give us that 5-star review so you can help more people discover this program and learn what's really going on. We'll see you next time.